Hi, this is Greg Benz with a quick video tutorial on manual exposure blending techniques using Photoshop to take an image that looks fairly flat like this, particularly the sky looks white and blown out because the camera couldn't capture all the detail, and produce a final image that looks something more like this. So whenever we're shooting images like this, we've got this original image here. There can be a number of challenges, but the biggest one here is that the sky is really kind of blown out. Now this is a sunrise with my back to the sun, so I nearly got the sky captured here. The histogram looks okay. However, when I tried to bring this down just using this single image, I really couldn't capture it. There was a lot of banding in the sky. It didn't look very natural. So really the next level to go to is exposure blending, where I'm going to take this exposure and combine it with this darker exposure here. But the first stop on that trip is to adjust this image in Lightroom. I want to do as much as I can with the original raw image. So in here, a couple of obvious issues. The rocks are very dull. There's no real pop or contrast. I've got the moon reflecting in the river here, which just is sort of distracting, not helpful. So I made several different adjustments here in the tonality, the tone curves, a little bit to the saturation, a little bit of split toning that I considered but didn't use here, and a little extra sharpening on this image. It was shot at low ISO, so I could push it pretty far. So really it's just adjustments in tone and clarity that took the original image from this to this. So looks pretty good already with that, but obviously the sky just isn't capturing any of the feeling that I saw that morning. So we're going to grab this other image here, which largely has the same tonal adjustments to it, and I darkened it even a little bit further. So the original on this actually wasn't as dark as it might seem, but it was dark enough to capture the highlights, and you can see from the curve here that nothing is blown out with these adjustments. I've got a really nice area for the sky here, which is all these tones here. So I'm just going to grab these two images, take them over to Photoshop, and you can see this first image here. I'm just simply going to copy everything with a Command A or Control A, and just simply copy, and then jump over to my normal exposure and paste right over the top of it. Because I was shooting on a tripod, everything lines up nicely. I don't have to do any sort of alignment. Looks really good. The next step is I need to create some luminosity masks. If I were to simply just select the sky and hand paint it, I wouldn't get a very nice transition around the horizon. I might if I worked at it for hours, but it would be very difficult to do. What I want to do is make some adjustments where I can paint in this darker layer, but just in the sky areas without impacting the mountains too much. If I were to use, say, the magic wand to do that, I'd have a really harsh transition area. So my goal is to completely reveal this top area, and then using luminosity masks, partially reveal this middle area and create a transition. And then down below here, I won't reveal any of this darker exposure. So going from 100% through a transition to a lighter area, and that should give me a nice looking image. So with the luminosity mask, I want to start where I've got really good separation of sky and foreground, and this darker image actually doesn't have a lot of separation. Much better basis for the mask is going to be my original here, where things are pretty nicely separated. And so I'm going to create some luminosity masks. These are using some free masking actions that I have on my website. There's certainly a number of really good options out there, some much more advanced options. This is just one way of creating some masks. It doesn't really matter which approach you take. So once you've created those masks, I'm going to go over to the channels here, and I can see I've created these masks. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn my layer back on, and I'm going to give it a mask. I'm going to invert that mask so the mask is blacked out right now on top, and now I just need to pick which of these masks I want to apply. What I want to do is paint over the highlights, so I just start with a lights mask. This lightest mask, it's not great separation, so I'll try a little bit darker. It's looking pretty good, but these areas here are still pretty highly selected, and go down one layer more. That looks pretty good to me. I don't want to go to the extreme where it's just black and white. If I do that, it wouldn't be much better than using the magic wand. So to me, this looks like the right balance of selecting the highlights and having enough transition. So I'm going to select that, click back on my RGB so I can see everything, and I'm going to hide the masking by just hitting Command H, which just makes it easier to work. And I'm switching over to my Wacom tablet, and I basically want to paint white on this sky layer. So I'm going to go over and use a brush, and I'm going to turn my flow down to maybe 10% or so. So I want to have full opacity with a soft brush and limited flow here. I don't want to paint too quickly because the trick here is to have a level of subtlety, and already I can see that's painting pretty fast. So I'm actually going to turn that down even further and try that. So now, again, my goal here is to just create a bit of a subtle area. Because I'm painting through a mask, I'm painting the sky more than the foreground here. And now I'm going to get these upper levels a little bit more painted in here, and I can really start to kind of paint pretty heavy up above. In fact, I can even deselect my mask. As long as I'm not working near that transition zone, I don't need the mask, and it actually can get in the way because the sky has a lot of variation too. And if I select some areas of the sky more than others, when I start to blend it, it can create kind of a flat sky. So my goal isn't to use a luminosity mask everywhere, it's just to use it on the transition zones and then let the sky come through the way it was photographed otherwise. So this is a pretty good selection of the sky, and you may be thinking, well, this looks kind of weird, it's not the sky I want. And my goal here isn't to get an exact sky. That image I used was actually under exposed, a little too dark, and I could have really worked on it to get it to the exact level I wanted, but I find that it's perfectly acceptable to use something that's a little bit over dark and just blend it in at less than full strength. So I'm simply going to dial this back until I get to a level that I like, and that looks pretty good. So right around 60% there, and we can see, taking from the original painting in the sky here, foreground hasn't been very impacted, and the sky here doesn't have all the pop that I'm going to land on when I'm fully done, but I'm going to use some different techniques to take this and finish that sky. I'm not looking to make the sky perfect at this stage. I just want to bring in enough information that I can go and do my next level of retouching. So that's all I need out of my exposure blend. So from there, I'm not going to walk through all the steps, but just kind of show you what I did to take it to the finished image. So here I've already done those steps. So I had my sky blend put on top of the background, and then essentially went through a series of steps to get to the finished image, starting with photo filter, which I wanted to give it a warming filter. And you can see here the sky gets a lot more yellow and vibrant, and I just thought with the original having kind of a nice gold here and transitioning to the blue sky a little too quickly, I just wanted to carry those colors right through the sky. So that was one way of doing that. Next here, it's actually a pretty crowded area, a lot of photographers, so the space where I got to shoot had a lot of foreground rock in it, and it's not adding to the image. I think it's really kind of taking away a little bit, so I wanted to diminish it, and so I used dodge and burning techniques, actually painted through a luminosity mask, but brought down these rocks, especially on the bottom left, to try and take them out. And the next, wanted to add more contrast in the midtones in these rocks, so using a midtone luminosity mask, I did a curves adjustment here, and you can see that curve making adjustments that really would apply here. One technique when you're making these adjustments is just to use the hand, and you can see where your tones are and actually grab them, so you can see that the rocks live between those 2 points that I stretched vertically to give that extra bit there. And if we look at this mask here on the adjustment mask, you can see it's pretty dark in the middle and some edges there. So this is a mid-tone mask, but I actually did paint down a little bit on it where the mask was showing too much contrast adjustment in parts of the sky. So I brushed that down a bit just to keep this from going from strong colors to white. So that was one small adjustment to this mask. And then a lot of the magic for this photo actually took place in Nik Color Efex Pro. And you can see the big jump I made here, a lot of tonal adjustments to get that level there. And I actually have a mask applied here, and you can see the difference here is in the river. And just when I was working in Nik, I ended up with a result where I thought the river was just maybe a little bit too dark, so I used a mask to paint out some of what I'd added in Nik and just preserve more of the original image. I thought that looked nicer with more of the blue throughout the river here. And then lastly, again, I did use that photo filter early on to color the sky, but there's still some residual blue in the sky, and it looks fine, but to my taste, I wanted to add a little bit of color, so I just added a new layer on top, set the mode to color. You can just use the eyedropper adjustment to go and quick pick up a color from the sky. I often will take that color and simply boost the saturation wherever I need it to be, but then just simply painted that over the sky, and you can see the blues there fading away to those nice gold tones, which I think just really carries forth nicely. And you don't need a lot here, so I painted with a pretty colorful brush, but then I backed down the opacity, and that's a technique I use a lot. So I'll sort of over adjust a little bit and then dial back the opacity, which just gives me a really nice way of feathering the result to get to exactly where I want, even if I don't know the exact color I need to brush on the sky or the exact amount. So that was just a nice quick adjustment there. So just kind of recapping, I went from this original image here, threw in some blending to bring the sky back just enough, and then with the rest of the adjustments here, landed on this final image of